So Donald Trump set the world on fire. Today, international markets are tumbling because he's imposed tariffs, something that the globe has never seen before. And everybody's scrambling to find an answer to the Trump tariffs. Today, Ghana has been doing same. And I have some good news for all of you as far as the relief is concerned. But there are significant areas of our economy that will be hit. As you know, today, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, the Trade and Finance Ministries met with the U.S. ambassador to Ghana following an invitation to her to come and explain what really was happening. There is a lot of global politics at play here, and Ghana has been caught in the middle of this. But there is some measure of good news that we're going to look at tonight as we begin to learn a bit more from this meeting. The 10% that we have been slapped right now, these Trump tariffs, he's calling it reciprocal tariffs. We're going to face 10% of that. Every item that we export to the U.S. now will attract that 10% tariff. I say every, but there are some exemptions tonight, which will be good news for a lot of people, because those two major items account for some 70% of what we export to the U.S. And so there's some good news there. We'll come to the specifics of this. We're learning a bit more from the Foreign Affairs Ministry tonight in terms of the outcome of this conversation with the U.S. ambassador. What we know for sure tonight is that all the AGUA-listed products will be affected. Trust me, that is a big, big hit. AGUA, of course, is the Trade and Opportunities Act of the U.S. that allowed African countries to export goods to the U.S. quota-free, duty-free. And there's a whole host of products that come under this particular umbrella trade agreement, which, by the way, expires later this year. We'll talk about that pretty shortly. But this was the catalyst for some part of our economy, the trade economy, part of the agri sector also producing and exporting to the U.S. It was a window. It led to the creation of jobs in some sectors. Now we know they're going to be hit pretty hard. Before today, there was speculation that the U.S. was going to create an exemption. After all, AGUA is a trade agreement that was approved by the U.S. Senate, I believe. And so this is something that is written into U.S. law. It's a policy. But by the stroke of pen, Trump has overwritten it. But can Trump really do this? Is a key question that many are asking tonight. But we know that Trump is saying, although AGUA exists, the American Trade and Opportunities Act exists, he is going to throw it out, and every goods that comes into the U.S. under that is going to be affected. Also, we're hoping, as of tonight, according to the government, that they'll get some exemptions for cocoa and garments, because these two are under AGUA, right? And before now, we were exporting all these cocoa products and garments to the U.S. duty-free, quota-free, but we now know it's going to be affected. And of course, the U.S. ambassador to Ghana is telling us that we're not maliciously targeted. Does it really matter? We know that our parts of our sectors will be well hit. In September later this year, AGUA is supposed to expire. The key question is whether or not the U.S. government will renew AGUA when it expires. The idea was that once it expires in September, there will be conversations about renewing it. It doesn't appear under Trump that this is going to happen. So AGUA will die officially in September, but it's already dead to all intents and purposes on the back of the Trump tariffs, right? So that's a key thing to watch also. We know that there are some key exports under AGUA that we have been trading with the U.S. duty-free, quota-free. Oil and gas was one of the key products, like cocoa product, yams, locally manufactured apparel, garments, wood. We exported that to the U.S. Duty-free, quota-free. Tonight, there are some exemptions. These exemptions really cover all the countries that are suffering under the weight of the Trump tariffs. But specifically mentioned in the statement that was issued today by the Foreign Affairs Ministry was that oil and gas will not be affected under the Trump tariffs as was imposed on Ghana, which is a big, big deal. Because if you look at the numbers we are looking at, you will begin to notice that the two key items, two key exports, I'm talking about oil and gas, formed 70% of what we exported to the U.S. And if that was covered, that would have been devastating, right? But that we know is not exempted. But Trump says it's reciprocal. Why was he saying that? Because if you look at this behind me here, this is what we have imposed on U.S. imports, if you like. When the U.S. manufacturers and the trade, giants export to us, we charge them this. We charge them some 5% for basic necessities when they manufacture and they bring it to Ghana. Semi-finished products, we charge them 10%. If it's finished consumer goods, we're charging them up to 20%. There are some specific goods that, because of the protection of our own local industries, we're charging imports into Ghana from the US 35%. So Trump says, well, I'm looking at this and I'm going to just do 10% for you. In fact, the US ambassador says we're not targeted like other countries, and it's true because other African countries are taking 14, some in the 50% extra tariffs slapped on them. So we are really at the lower band when it comes to the tariffs that Trump has imposed. Nonetheless, we are going to take a hit because they're 5.68% of all our exports was to the US. And a huge part of this was oil and gas. Now, what you see here, we have a trade surplus since 2019 when it comes to our trade relations with the US, which is a good thing, which means that we were actually exporting more to the US than importing, which is good, except that majority of what we were exporting to the US, which accounted for this $2.7 billion, was oil and gas. Fundamentally, oil, right? Now that is not affected. So we expect this to still keep to this same trend. However, the other products will be affected. Trump says, if you have a trade surplus with me, then I will impose the tariffs. Trump says it's reciprocal, but what really he wanted to do was to balance out the trade deficit that America was having in other countries, including Ghana. But we've been treated relatively leniently compared to other countries that suffer this. And these are the numbers there. You look at crude there. Crude accounted for $1.28 billion. Now, this is cocoa products, 288 million. So we're going to lose out on $288 million worth of exports to the U.S. as far as cocoa products are concerned. And this could possibly go up depending on, the ingenuity of our local manufacturing. Tonight we have one of the businessmen who will be affected, a trader who will be affected by this. He exports cocoa products to the U.S. He's one of those who's going to be taking a hit. He may possibly have to consider laying workers off. That is how the Trump tariffs affect us here in Ghana. $288 million worth of exports will be hit by this 10%. This trader will have to pay 10% more. Where is he going to get the money from? Is he going to pass it on to the U.S. Consumers? That is a challenge that he needs to face there. And then we're talking about some 31 million soya beans. Again, those in that part of the value chain, as far as agri is concerned, will have to face this too. And then foodstuff accounting for 55 million. So this is big deal for those who play in this particular part of the economy. And then the top 5 exports, as I've mentioned already, we have crude oil there, but cocoa beans comes in second place. And those in there, this 288 million worth of exports, will take a major hit. And for a country like Ghana, and the jobs that this sector creates for us, is something that obviously government is looking at. And we've been told tonight by the government, they're looking to try and negotiate some exemptions for cocoa products also going to the USA. Now, US, by the way, is not part of our top 5 trading countries, right? It's not. So we are not doing so much trade with US as we do with, say, Switzerland, with Dubai, with South Africa. It's even there, whilst US is in the top 5. China, and of course, India. So you could say that, 288 million, 10% on that, it's going to hit some industries, definitely. But this is a hit that we should be able to survive and take in our stride. We cannot even imagine thinking about reciprocal or retaliatory tariffs because really we are a pretty tiny little country in the big global scheme of things when there's a global power play at play. Tonight, let's have a conversation. So where do we go from here on the back of the meeting with the U.S. ambassador? My guests are joining me for a conversation here on PMX, so stay with me. Thank you everyone for joining us here on PM Express and staying with us. This is a big conversation indeed on the back of the meeting that the Foreign Affairs Ministry had today with the American ambassador, having very fundamental conversations about what the impact of the Trump tariffs will be on Ghana within the context of the African Growth and Opportunities Act. It is an act of the U.S. That had been passed in the early 2000s. And so you're wondering today, ahead of the meeting, whether it will be one of those exempted, because it's an act, it had to go through a certain process for it to be repealed, if you like. But Trump, being Trump, he has, by just a stroke of pen, said today through the ambassador that is indeed going to be hit pretty hard. And so, for all intents and purposes, AGWA is dead. Although it was meant to be expiring in September, it's gone now. We'll have a conversation about that pretty shortly, because there are guests joining me today who are directly affected by the decisions that has been taken. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the outcome of today's meeting. PMFS is always brought to you by Syntex Tanks, the strong in the staff, Academic Times newspaper, and Pepsodent Cavity Fighter toothpaste. My guest joining me for a conversation, it's Seth Atta. And Seth is the senior manager at the Decor Craft Limited. And he will talk to us pretty shortly, because I know they are into the export of cocoa products, and so they are directly affected by this. Also joining me is Samson Ahi. And Samson Ahi is the Deputy Trade Minister. Long time no talk, Mr. Ahi. I'm grateful that we can get to talk to you. And I must say, he used to be a very good friend of mine, and he disappeared somehow. I'm happy to be talking.
I'm still your friend.
Good. I'm happy to know that. He's a Deputy Minister of Trade. He was in a meeting today, and he will give us some insight into the discussions and the way forward, because they also hinted at negotiating further exemptions. Felix Anaman is the CEO of Anaman Concierge Services. He is in the US, and he does some great business. His business is flourishing, and he has ambitions on obviously expanding into Ghana. And how is he thinking about what Trump had done and the potential impact on him and his business? Felix, thanks for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you kindly.
And Dr. Kamasa Felix Mawuli is the president of the Vegetable Producer and Exporters Association. And I'm delighted that he can also join us, because they are also affected. They were also covered under AGWA, I believe. And now that we know it's gone, I wonder what the alternatives are. Not gone necessarily, because you have just 10% to pay. I'm saying yes. Is it really? And Seth, I need to ask you that question. Yeah. Because before today, when this took effect, I believe Trump said immediately last week, he didn't want to make it an April Fool's announcement. He wanted to do it on the 2nd. You were exporting quota-free, duty-free, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So now you're going to be paying 10%. How much of a difference will the 10% make to you?
Yeah, so that's a big problem to us. So for us, we were thinking of even, there's a sister company in the US that we are looking at producing in Ghana and shipping the products to sell in US.
First of all, what exactly do you export?
We export chocolate and other cocoa-related products from Ghana to the US and other parts of Europe. So, in fact, we were looking at this year producing in Ghana, and a sister institution is set up in the US to sell on our behalf there. But look at what's happening. I mean, if you look at the intent and purpose, Trump is looking at this imposition is supposed to shift jobs to the US market, right? Mm-hmm. So if we are supposed to go by what we had planned, that to produce in Ghana, meaning jobs will be created in Ghana for the Ghanaian youth and people here, whilst we ship the product. But now it's looking like this 10% imposition, how is it going to be? Should we produce in the US and create the jobs there? Because if you do that, I mean, you're going to...
That's Trump's point. Trump says he wants to bring jobs to the US.
Exactly, right? So that's the kind of problem that's been created now. So there's an impact. So,
but even if you have to do that in the US, you still have to export the raw material then.
Exactly. So cocoa is more of an international product, right? So you can easily buy it from elsewhere, right? Yeah. So that one will not be much of a problem. Yeah. So the issue is now, after you've added value to it and you are sending from the origin of Ghana here, then there's a 10% because of the origin. Mm-hmm. I mean, fortunately, we are better compared to like Ivory Coast that is being hit by 21%.
Yes.
Yeah. So it depends where you look at it from. But I think it's a big blow to us. We are now looking at the figures, how it's going to impact on the company, and the kind of decision you want to make.
How many people do you employ?
Oh, directly in Ghana, we are about 20 people.
Okay.
Yes. But there are other indirect jobs that we create.
So your cost of doing business will go up?
Exactly.
At least by 10%.
Yeah. And it's going to affect the price of our products, right, on the market. So
on the market there in the US?
Exactly. But I mean, the other good thing is that it's not only Ghana that's affected. So other European countries, Switzerland, highly hit by the tariff.
And Switzerland exports a lot of finished, cocoa products.
So if you look at the entire market and what's happening, it's an interesting development, and we see how things will pan out in the next.
Just before I go to my other guest, though, if you look at the 10%, have you sort of quantified it just yet as to what it will mean for your bottom line? Because now when you get to the ports in the US, you have to pay that tariff, when previously you didn't have to budget for it. How much more is it going to cost you to do that?
Okay, so
looking at the volumes that you export.
Yeah, so we as an organization not so much concerned about the cost, because this is a cost that will be transferred to the end consumer, right? So it's more of making your product less competitive on the market. But as I said, the good thing is that it's not only Ghana specific. It's affecting, all parts of the world. As I said, Switzerland is even having around 20 to 30% hit. So meaning, if we are being less competitive, they're also being hit by that, right? So maybe those companies that will be on the advantageous position will be those that are cited in the US.
It's a very interesting point you make about even the Ivory Coast scenario, because they have a higher tariff there. And they also, of course, they are the largest producer of cocoa now, and cocoa products. They add more value even than us, we know that. If it's going to cost them more to export to the US, it makes sense, does it not, if you're a business person in Ivory Coast, to bring your cocoa products to Ghana and export it under the Ghanaian umbrella, and then you get the 10% instead of the higher ones there. So there are opportunities there, I guess, that you could. But stay with me. I want to bring in Dr. Kamasa before I go to Samson to give us a brief on what he's hearing and what he's had factored into the conversations with the U.S. ambassador today. Dr. Kamasa, so as far as the vegetables sector is concerned, you were also covered under AGUA, correct?
Yes, Evans, you are right.
Yeah, and so how will this 10% affect you?
Yeah, as my friend at the studio saying, normally we pass on to the consumer or the buyer, the end buyer, but it's going to make our price to be higher, because though, especially, Ghana, we are the leading exporter of yam to US market, though Nigeria produce more yam more than Ghana, but Ghana export more yam than Nigeria, where we know most of our yam go to US market with a volume. So when it happens like this, it's going to, I know Caribbean also come to the market. Actually, I was checking to see how the tariff also, the percentage of tariff is going to Caribbean, but it's going to affect our export. The reason being that the price is going to be higher. So the consumers there, the buyer also, the distributor also is going to pass on the cost to the consumer, because they are not going to be a lose side. So definitely it's going to affect our export market. And then when it's like that, it triggers down to our production, because the volume we normally export is going to reduce. Though Ivory Coast tariff is higher than Ghana tariff, but it's something we have to look at it. I want to have opportunity to meet the trade minister. He's here to see how best they can look at the bilateral trade again and see how best they can negotiate, because this is what we are trying to reset agriculture sector and export sector. What can we do different to support this SME? Because these are small SME.
Yeah, let's be a bit more specific about your industry. You say your production volumes will be affected because of this arrangement. How will that affect your ability to employ, your ability to scale up, and what would that mean for your pocket, the bottom line?
Yeah, basically adding value to the yam sector, or it's not only the yam alone. even the cassava flour, there's a lot of cassava flour. There's a lot of gari also go to the export sector. So when it happens like that, you are not getting, you have the orders, and then the buyer is not able to distribute with the volume, the contract you have. We already signed a contract. For example, you Evans, we signed a contract to supply maybe 200 container by the close of the year. And this tariff happen is going to add on to the buyer, the distributor's cost. So he will pass on the cost to the consumer. So it's going to reduce in terms of the contract you have. When it happens like that, it triggers down to the production, because the yam, we normally aggregate the yam with the smallholder farmers because they also know the timeline of the export. So if you are not getting those, the smallholder farmers you are dealing with, getting the volume, and these are perishable products, that's the areas I'm talking about that is going to reduce
so typically
the export
now,
and the volume.
So typically, your members and yourselves, you pay that 10% tariff when the goods arrive. Is that what it is?
Yes, sometimes they pass on. You know, our export is in twofold. There's FOB and a CIF. If the client wants you to do the CIF, that means you are going to pay the freight cost here in Ghana.
Okay.
So when it happens like that, you add on that tariff taxes, they will pass on to the exporter here to pay. So your cost of the product, you want to add on the cost to the buyer, then is going to be higher for the buyer to take the volume he'd be taking previously. He's not going to take that volume. Basically, that's what is going to be a challenge. So we are the end. It will affect we the exporters seriously, which we are thinking that they have to look at it. If we come to at least 4 or 5%, I think it's something we can look at with, and then export more to this industry.
And I'll get the U.S. Perspective shortly when Felix joins me. But I want to go to Samson Ahi. He's the Deputy Trade Minister. And from what I understand, Mr. Ahi, you were part of the meeting today with the U.S. Ambassador?
Yes, it was.
So you've heard the concerns, and I'm pretty sure that is why this was an urgent meeting for the government. We've seen the statement, but we know that AGWA is affected by the 10%. What do you tell them? What do you tell them about the outcomes from this meeting and how that could, down the line, give them some relief?
Yeah, thank you very much, Evans. We all know that on the 2nd of April, the U.S. president announced series of tariffs on several countries, including Ghana. We were slapped with 10% tariffs. And so that has created anxiety, has created panic among business, especially exporters, onto the U.S. market. And so today we met with the U.S. ambassador and her team to seek for clarifications, to seek for reasons for this sudden imposition of 10% tariffs on Ghana. So the meeting was held in a friendly environment, and so we sought to ask for explanation in regards to why the 10%. The ambassador tried to offer some explanations, and like you said, we all know that most African countries take advantage of AGWA to enter the U.S. market without paying tax, without paying any tariffs on the goods that are exported onto the U.S. market. And we all know that AGWA is supposed to come to an end September 2025, this year. But with the introduction of 10%, you can conclude that they have decided to end AGWA and not going to renew it anymore. So we asked, so with the slapping of the 10%, then what happens to AGWA? And they told us, one of the US people who came told us that they were asked from by last week to actually start assessment of countries as to which countries will be renewed to be allowed to continue with AGWA. But suddenly, they were not aware with this imposition, and so they themselves were also in a phase. They didn't know the rationale for this tariffs. And so, in a nutshell, we've realized that the only way out is to continue the trade diplomacy, to continue to engage the U.S. authorities to ensure that, to see whether they can review it to do something about Ghana's 10% tariffs on our export into the U.S. market. Again, I mean, we ask why, because if you want to impose taxes on to remain competitive, you want to consider, you will do that based on the commodities that you have competitive advantage of. US, they don't produce cocoa, but they have slapped the 10% on cocoa. So we sought clarification, and the ambassador too was surprised, and she felt that if you pursue it, commodity like cocoa can be exempted from the 10%.
When he said pursue it, does it mean that the government should pursue it directly with the Trump administration, or she will facilitate that conversation?
No, she even suggested that we should have a higher platform for discussing this particular matter. She thinks that we should engage at a higher level, but that is bringing in the president and at a top governmental level. And because she didn't understand why they will include cocoa, while they know that they don't produce cocoa. And so that was stated clearly. And apart from that, we also know that as Africans, we have agreed to fight this collectively. And so on the 14th of this month, after it's organizing a meeting with African trade ministers to look at this situation.
So Ghana is going to join the continental fight against the tariffs?
Exactly. So the trade minister will be part of the 14th meeting, which will be organized by after on the 14th of this month.
And what will be our position going into this continental trade meeting with the intention of fighting the tariffs? Well, for Ghana, what is our interest there? If you can define that for me.
Yes, Ghana, our interest is to ensure at the moment we have trade surplus with US. Last year, 2024, there was a surplus of 244 million US dollars. That means we have an advantage when we continue to trade with US on the terms of AGWA and the terms of the flexibility that we have. And so we believe strongly that we are not going to antagonize the US. We believe that we should continue to engage trade diplomacy because I'm sure you are aware that as at Saturday, it was announced by the White House that 44 countries has requested to engage with the US authorities with regards to negotiation on the new tariffs, which means that there is a window of diplomacy. And so we also want to take advantage. In fact, Trump himself said that he's open to negotiations, he's open to discussions on going forward. And so we want to take advantage.
And quick clarification on that. Considering that the ambassador said that Ghana should engage at the highest level to try and get the exemption for cocoa products, for example, are you adopting the approach where the president then gets involved and puts in a call directly with Trump, or you're going to come under the African umbrella in pushing back against the tariffs? What's Ghana's approach going to be?
I mean, we are exploring all avenues. There is a collective approach that is being championed by the AFTA. And as a sovereign state too, we also have the right to negotiate on our own. And so if we are negotiating on our own, that is where we will lift the discussions to the higher level or at the governmental level. And so all issues are on the table to look at.
And today, my understanding was that the president was going to be briefed after your meeting. Has he been briefed, and has he bought into the idea of getting involved in the engagements with Trump directly to try and see if we can negotiate a certain positive outcome for our businessmen and women?
Yes, we briefed the president after the meeting. Myself and the foreign affairs minister met with the president, and then we briefed the president. And he also largely believes that we should pursue the trade diplomacy to ensure that something can be done about the tariffs. Because at the end of the day, if we compare the advantages that earned by Ghanaians as against the US, we will lose as against the US market. And for that matter, we believe strongly that it's not a time for us to fight. There's no trade war, even though we are not happy with the imposition of the 10% tariffs, but we think that we should adopt more friendly, diplomatic way in trying to resolve the matter. But judging from the outcomes of the meeting, I want to assure the business sector and the business community that the government will pursue whatever we have to do to ensure that this matter is resolved so that we can continue to export onto the US market and continue to end the foreign exchange that helps our economy.
And very quickly, you can confirm that the president, that we can expect the president to get involved himself at the presidential level, engaging Trump directly, because that's what other countries have done. Their prime ministers and presidents are reaching out directly. In fact, today, we've seen even Israel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in US, they're talking about Gaza and everything else, but top on the agenda is also negotiating their 17% downwards. Is the president going to be involved directly in this conversation too with Trump directly?
What I can say is that the president has charged us to ensure that all efforts are made to ensure that this problem is addressed.
It's addressed, okay.
And yes, and I'm sure that once we have his blessings, if he has to intervene, he will certainly do that.
Okay, great. I want to bring Felix. Felix, so you're a successful businessman in the US. I know you're also doing some great work, bringing the knowledge and expertise back home. You've watched the global dynamics at play. The Trump tariffs is affecting Ghana, your home country, a place where you want to expand to. What's your own assessment? What are your reflections on what this will mean for your business and the ambitions to work in Ghana and vice versa?
Well, I mean, this doesn't change for me. My ambition or interest in working in Ghana is still standing and even stands strong. I think that, first of all, we need to understand what tariffs are so that at least people listening can actually understand exactly. So these are some sort of duties that a government imposes on imports, all right? So to balance deficits, and I believe Nana would share more light on it because we talked about that. And depending on how you look at tariffs, it can be good, it can be bad. Now, if you're a country that depends heavily on imports without having much to bring on the table, then this will be a negative impact to you. But if you're a country that also import and export, then you can find ways and means around it. Now, it creates opportunities for a country to rely on resources within. But if you're a country that heavily depend on import, then this becomes a bit of a challenge. So tariffs in its way are good for a country. It creates employment, it creates opportunities, so much opportunities, and then it can be bad. But in this day and age, I think there's a good case study now because it's developing into trade wars. That economists would have to reassess. Would it be good for today's economy? To some extent, probably not. To some extent, yes. Now, it is yes when you don't have anything to bring to the table. So, for example, Ghana, we have cocoa. We have some great resources that US doesn't have. So we have something to bring to the table. So we can go and say, okay, it's either you reduce this for us, or we also slap in tariffs on on the services that you guys have.
Except that Ghana has quite some hefty tariffs already on products emanating from the US into the country. And as the minister has said, we really don't have the muscle to even attempt a retaliatory action against the US. Because already we are charging them quite a bit. From all the way up to 35% is on some specific goods from the US.
And you're right. I was actually coming to that. So we look at the muscles that the country has to pull, and then that would determine the direction to go. But for me as a business owner, again, I come to the fact that it depends on how you look at it to assess.
And I want to bring in another businessman who joins us just to get the whole global picture on this particular matter. And Nana Sapanyin is the co-founder of Zack Educational Consulting and Zack Careers. And then from what I understand, you do quite significant business not only in Ghana but in the US also, and you trade across the border. Will this affect you in any way and how?
So for me personally, it would not affect me, but one of my businesses in Ghana, Zack Careers, I mean, we're working with companies to have to post their jobs and get students in Ghana and recent graduates get employment. Now with these tariffs hidden, I'm assuming Mr. Felix saying it's going to affect his bottom line. He might choose not to hire a person so that he can make an extra money. So it's affecting Ghana in a lot of ways. The trade minister, the deputy trade minister, the honorable, did say that they're working with something like cocoa. Cocoa farming, America doesn't make cocoa or doesn't grow cocoa, but they put in taxes on cocoa. And if America says, no, we're not going to listen and we're going to do it, I'm sure cocoa farmers and cocoa board and other places might choose not to hire some people. And that is going to affect my business in that way because there's going to be less jobs being posted on my website. So, but for my export and import too, same thing, exporting from the United States to Ghana. I'm sure with the 100,000 taxes we have in Ghana, Ghana might try to also find a way to make extra money of imports coming in from us to compensate for some of the losses they're making currently.
And I need to bring you in. I mean, the deputy minister made the point about cocoa, and that when they met the ambassador, there's a suggestion there that conversations should continue at the very highest level and try and negotiate and setting a positive outcome. Because America hasn't got that competitive advantage when it comes to cocoa, they need the cocoa, right? Does that address any of your concerns? Hearing him talk, does that give you any comfort?
A little, and as I say, it's early days yet. We hope that, I mean, as oil and gas has been exempted, cocoa too be exempted, and that will be good for us, good news for us. Yeah, so we're hoping that as the Deputy Minister had assured, that the President and, I mean, high-ranking government officials will be involved in this whole negotiation and see how they can use diplomacy to resolve this issue. We think, yeah, it's a good way to go. And once this is done, yeah, it will bring some relief to our industry and it will help us as a company.
Okay. I mean, but specifically, what do you want? Currently it's 10%.
Yeah.
What would be ideal for you?
Oh, I mean, no tax.
Zero.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah. But Trump won't give you zero.
I mean, you never know. I mean, let's push for that.
Yeah.
If you push for the ultimate and you don't get it, and even maybe get like 1 or 2 or 3, I mean, that's fine. But we wish that there won't be any tariff at all. I mean, this is a time where even global cocoa, I mean, production is at a short
dropped. Yes.
I mean, look at the price escalation over the past year now. That's, I mean, mind-boggling. So this is not a good time to, I mean, impose any tariff on cocoa and cocoa-related products. We think that we should be carried at the zero rate as it is now. Then, if government could push, even if it's not zero and it's, I mean, something below 5, you'll find a way to manage around it.
Yeah, and that is a very important point you raised, but also the Ghana's ability to work with the continental body to get a fair outcome. And Mr. Ahid, that point though, you say that we're going to be joining the African push for this. Don't you think we risk antagonizing the US through that collective action? Because relatively, we haven't been hit with much. Compared to our neighbors, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, we are one of those countries that have been treated very leniently in this Trump tariffs regime, if you like, the global new world order. We're now going to be joining other countries in the continent who have facing some of them in excess of 50% tariffs. So their interest is quite different from ours. And also considering that the 70% of our exports will not be affected, as in oil and gas, shouldn't we just pursue that line of action which the ambassador proposes, a unilateral approach to dealing diplomatically with the US to negotiate our own outcome than joining the continent where many, many other countries are facing higher tariffs and incurring the wrath of Trump, by the way?
To some extent, what we're saying is right, but don't forget that we are Africans first and foremost, and if we bring our markets in block on the table, I think we can achieve a lot, because you are so I don't think you are suggesting that because of this we should not be part of what AU will be doing.
Well, that's what countries with their own personal interests pursue, right? Because you're looking at your case, you're not as bad as the others. If you join the others, you are now telling the US you're joining the likes of South Africa that we know Trump has an issue with, and other countries of the continent. He's going to brush all of you with the same
Evans, I think it depends on the context of the discussions at the after level. It depends on the context of the discussions or the negotiations. I'm not sure after is going to fight US. I'm not sure after is going to antagonize US and say that as an Africans, this is our position, this is our rigid position, take it or not. I don't think that's going to be the attitude. I'm sure the attitude will be like employing the same trade diplomacy going into the discussions. And so I'm not sure Ghana is ready to be part of any attempts to go and fight or engage in a trade war with US at the moment. And so we will advise ourselves and then be part of after negotiation, but based on making sure that the diplomacy is on the table strongly. And if we find out that that is being deviated upon, we will advise ourselves. But I believe as Africans, at this stage, that is the time that we should come together collectively and then fight for our businesses to thrive.
I mean, and fellas, give me the US perspective to this. Trump's argument is that he's doing this to help the US economy. Your business is fundamentally in the US, although you have an arm of the business in Ghana, but the fundamentally is in the US. Does this help your cause there?
Well, it does. It does. Like I said, for me, I look at it from a different angle. Yes, it will have eventually the trickling effect will come to everyone. Everyone will be affected, which is a fact that we can't run away from. But then again, you're looking at in my industry, you're looking at transportation, for example. Mm-hmm. People are moving all the time. So, for example, we have companies that are coming in and producing right here in the States as a result of the tariffs, right? Now, this is a direct opportunity for my company, for example, to provide them with transportation. So you're looking at, for me, I'm looking at it from a different angle as a transportation provider and saying that, okay, this potentially is good for me. For example, we're looking at developing solutions for employee van pool, for example, and for companies that are actually moving in to my area. And for me, it's going to create a lot of opportunities for my business So again, it depends on how you look at it with this tariffs war that is coming. And like I said earlier on, I was looking at the numbers of poultry. Now, U.S. produces imports, tons of poultry product. At the same time, for example, chicken wings, U.S. consume, probably the largest consumers of chicken wings, right? Now, and it balances. Now, what happens to the tariffs that other countries are imposing on U.S., for example? Now, it creates opportunity. If I think about it as a business person, opportunity in there. It creates opportunity for us to actually consume what we produce. If tariffs are slapped on it so much that it cannot be exported out. Now, that eventually can also reduce the prices on chicken wings, for example, because there's going to be a lot of them on the market. Now, with this exports, now we need to also find out how important, for example, is export of products as a country to the people within the country. If it is that important, you can introduce subsidies to help offset some of the costs so that it can go out. Now, if a country has something to bring to bear, then they can go and negotiate. Now, this whole thing for me, I believe, as a business person, goes back to negotiations. So Ghana would have to probably, and as any country, would have to have a very strong leaders to go and negotiate. It's an opportunity to go to the table and negotiate and even sell Ghana and let them know that, hey, we have these opportunities. We have these gold, diamond, bauxite. We are a player. We are not just small, company or, a small country. To push Ghana and for them to say, okay.
And you made the point, I want to bring in Dr. Kamasa into the conversation. Doc, so with your vegetables, is U.S. your number one trading partner when it comes to export for the vegetables that you produce, you and your members?
Yeah, mostly is the yam. Yam, we are number one in the market.
Okay, so U.S. is your number one export market for yam?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for yam.
Now that it's costing you more now to export to the U.S., are you looking at alternative markets?
Yeah, we have Europe market, which is also emerging. But U.S., the kind of volume of yam go to U.S. market is very huge, because bear in mind that a lot of Caribbean Africans live around close to, so they know this product very well. Where over the years, Ghanaian exporters export a lot of yam to U.S. As I mentioned earlier on, we are number one yam exporter in the whole world to U.S. So if you look at the trade, U.S. market is one of our biggest market with the volume. So negotiation is very key. I'm happy the deputy minister is saying this, but I want us they should speed up, and then they can able to negotiate and come back at least look around maybe 2% or 3%, because already Ghana is crying in terms of exchange rate. We need the export proceed. So this is the time for us to look at that area very well, and then able to negotiate, and then exporters can able to export more. Then we can rake in the foreign currency into this country where we are trying to reset the export sector. So I'm glad we are having this discussion. The first step, that's what they already take the step to have a discussion with ambassador. We have to, after they had a meeting in terms of all the African leaders, they had a meeting what the deputy minister is proposing. I will urge the deputy minister that they will take it further with the foreign minister to arrange so that they can meet what you are proposing to meet as a Ghana.
Well, he suggested already that they've briefed the president. The president is giving them the mandate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
so that's already possible. But just before we wrap up, I need, Mesahi, a quick point. AGWA, in 2000, there was a lot of advocacy by Ghana and other African countries to get the U.S. to pass that act. Now it expires in September. Trump has effectively killed it, we know. But is there a move among ourselves working hand in hand with our partners on the continent to, through advocacy, get a renewal or get a replacement, some form of a replacement for the AGWA initiative?
Yeah, from what I learned from today's meeting, we were told that as of last week, the U.S. Embassy in Ghana had an indication from U.S. to start assessing countries with regards to review of the AGUA extension into 2026. And so they were looking at countries that will qualify to be part of AGUA after the review. Then suddenly, last week, the tariffs imposition came. And so they are also taking the matter back to US to look at it. So we are looking at a situation where AGUA will not be, terminated at September, but there will be a program to continue AGUA, so that once we have AGUA in place, then this, you don't even talk about this 10% tariffs, because once you have AGUA enforced, automatically then you can go into the US market without tariffs. And so that is another angle that we are going to push to ensure that the AGUA is renewed, so that it doesn't end come September 2025, but there will be something form of AGUA to continue, so that we don't even talk about whether you are going to negotiate for 2% or 3% or 4%.
Yeah.
But because we know that once we have AGUA, then we don't even talk about these things.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so that is another angle that we are looking at seriously to ensure that U.S. government come back and then try to review AGUA so that we can have free, zero tariffs onto the U.S. market.
Yeah, and Nana, very quickly, I'll come back to you, I said before we wrap up. And Nana, from your point of view, as somebody who trades on both sides of the Atlantic, really in the U.S., when your goods now get into the U.S., how much more expensive is it going to be with the 10%?
I mean, it's gonna be a little bit higher for me, especially with parts. I mean, right now the company I'm working with over here, we import parts into the US. And with talking to Felix, his vehicle parts are gonna go up. So when it comes to maintenance, maintaining his vehicles are gonna be more expensive. We import from Canada into the US. And Canada imposed a 25% tax on parts coming from Canada into the US. So right now, my company here is negotiating with the Trump government and also the Canadian government to try and help with taking some of these parts off. So for Felix, maintenance is going to be higher just for every other American, yeah, where maintenance buying parts is going to be higher. So value wise, I mean, it's going to go up, at least from what I heard, at least by $100+ for some of the parts that I work on. It's going to go up, and it's going to affect the consumer drastically.
Okay. And Seth, have you heard anything tonight that says you can weather this storm?
Yes.
You don't have to consider laying off your 20 workers because of the extra cost?
Yes. I mean, we've seen worse than this.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you can weather the storm.
Exactly. There's sometimes we think we can manage it. We can manage, but we hope that this whole tariff increment or imposition that is coming will be, dealt with. Still mean at zero, and even if it will be, there'll be an imposition something less than 5%, maybe it could be managed.
Okay. Thank you very much, Seth. Thank you all of you for joining us. Samson, Felix, Dr. Kamasa, and Nana, all of you joining us. We'll see the outcome of the conversation next week when the continent takes it up. Yes.
Israel is working to have a meeting with the players in the exports sector.
Okay.
And I'm sure this will be this week. And so they should look out for invitations so that we can all sit on the table. We need to also get their views. Some of them are the technical people. We should have their views as to how we should resolve these matters going forward. Okay. And so in course of the week, we'll call for a meeting, and we expect all of them to come and share their experiences and their professional advice so that collectively we can find a solution to this problem.
Okay, Samson, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.